Good evening. I'm calling to order the June 19th, 2024 Board of Supervisors meeting. We're going to begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll do roll call. Supervisor McCartney?
Present.
Okay, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Supervisor Grenier?
Here.
Supervisor Ross?
Here.
Supervisor Blendy?
Here.
Awesome. So, James, congratulations again on your daughter's marriage.
Thank you very much. It was a beautiful wedding.
Yeah. So we're going to begin with the community announcements, and I'm just going to go through those. These are where if you have a youth group or you need to make a community announcement, you can email us at admin@lmt.org, and we'll post them here. To register for the pool, and I urge you to do that soon because, well, it's summertime, and if anybody knows, it was super hot today, and what better place to be than the pool? So visit www.lmt.org. And if you have free time on the weekends and would like to volunteer your time, you can join the Friends of 5 Mile Woods cleanup days. These are held the second Saturday of the month at 5 Mile Woods starting at 8:30 a.m. Please come in comfortable shoes that you don't mind getting dirty and bring along your work gloves and water to stay hydrated. There will be work on litter cleanup, trail lining, and pruning. You can email Monica Tierney at monicat@lmt.org if you'd like to join. The LMT Board of Supervisors recognizes Juneteenth, that's today, and calls on the residents of Lower Makefield Township to celebrate Juneteenth and to recommit to work together to eradicate systemic racism and inequity in our society. On Friday, July 19th, LMT will be hosting a blood drive with the Red Cross here from 12 to 5. So it's right in this meeting room. To sign up and get more information, go to redcrossblood.org and enter the sponsor code Lower Makefield. I have to keep reminding folks that we do need blood badly, so volunteer if you can. At this time, I'll accept public comment on any non-agenda items. No one is at the podium, and I don't have any folks online on the call, so we'll move on to the consent agenda items. These items will be handled in one motion as long as no supervisor or member of the public has any issues with any of the items 6A through H.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? Hearing none. Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That would be 5-0. One last thing just on the let's see, is that 7D? Oh, I'm remiss in saying that item 9D on the manager's report is being removed from the agenda, and that will be brought to the next meeting, just for those who are following along. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the engineer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fellow supervisors, we have 3 items for the meeting this evening, the first of which is related to the 2024 road program. As part of the work that we looked at with staff and with the contractor, they were able to help with replacement of inlet tops and also to repair some inlet structures in the roads that are going to be repaved. So the work to add that to the contract is what's included with this change order number 1. The total amount for the work, it's about 28 inlet tops and 2 structures that are being repaired. That total is $55,338. That revised contract value with that addition is $1,118,055.80. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And the request this evening is to approve change order number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
7B.
Item B, we have a resolution for a grant opportunity that the township's looking to submit. This is kind of a continuation of the grants that we had resolutions for last meeting for basin retrofit work around the township. These basins are projects identified in the township's approved pollutant reduction plan. This one in particular is for the Growing Greener Plus grant, and what we have before the board tonight is the resolution just to acknowledge the project, acknowledge the 15% match. We are requesting a grant-funded total of $341,336. This is for basins in the Core Creek watershed. The 15% match would have an obligation for the township of $60,236. So with that, when we hear back from the grant funding, we'll work with staff to either possibly pursue some other opportunities to help with the match, or it can go into the planning with budget going into next year for a project.
So moved.
Second.
So I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is this literally just for the application for the grant, and then if we get the grant, then we'll figure out how it's going to be done?
Correct, yeah, that's the plan with, as far as planning out funding for the projects.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And while we haven't had final word, there may also be federal funding in this space too that, we may be seeing. So, we're not sure. So this is, would be lovely if we were to get it as well. 7C, general project updates.
Yes, for some updates for this month, just a
Do
few
we need to do
items.
something with
Oh,
that?
yeah, pardon. Oh, you
Oh,
caught
yes.
me. Good one.
I won't get ahead.
Oh, yeah. Call the question. Since we have a motion. Any public comment on this before we call the question? Okay. I have a motion and seconded, right?
Yep.
So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. Sorry.
Thank you. For the last item, we have just some general updates for projects. We mentioned the road program already. The contractor is beginning this week. They will begin with the concrete work, which will be the ADA ramps. It will now include also the inlet top work, and that's done before they would come through and do the milling and paving. There's also in the Penn Valley Manor neighborhood, there's work being completed by PA American Water. That work will be completed before they come and repave the road. So the paving may not occur until a little later in the summer, but we're working with the contractors to coordinate schedules for that. For the Woodside Road Path Project, an update with that, PECO did confirm they're completely done with their work as of the 6th of June. That leaves Verizon, Comcast, and Crown Castle, another telecom, on the old poles. So we're working with them to move their utilities to the new poles, at which point PECO will be able to remove those old ones, and we'll be able to finish the project for the trail. It's likely the moving of the remaining utilities would be still a few weeks here. We're hopeful that that will be wrapped up, June, July, for them to be completely off those old poles. An update for the Highland Drive project. We have, as we reported last meeting, submitted the permit package to the PADEP. The kind of parallel review that goes on with that is the County Conservation District that is going on this week. We are pleased to say that we've been able to schedule that follow-up open house with the neighborhood and the public that will be this coming Tuesday, the 25th, here at the Township Building at 7 p.m. And that will, present the plans as they've gone into the permitting agencies. I would say the final design plans as opposed to some of the more preliminary work that was showed at the original open house a few months ago. And we'll look to, obviously welcome any feedback from the neighborhood and the public in an effort to finalize those plans once the permit comments come back as well. And lastly, the Taylorsville Road Improvement Project, which I know is on the agenda for the full scope of services with the manager's report. But we did discuss that grant opportunity last meeting that's due at the end of July. So I did want to just an update that with authorization to fully proceed with that field work and design, our survey staff would be beginning to head out there on the 24th, so next Monday. You'll see some folks doing some survey out there, and that goes into the preparation of plans and other documents we'll have for that grant as well. With that, any questions I'd be happy to answer for any other projects that might be going on.
On Highland Drive, you mentioned, looking at your report, that there should be some updated project tables that'll be available by today's meeting. Are those
Yes.
available?
We did provide an updated schedule for that. We actually met this afternoon with staff just to make some revisions that they had in mind to add to it, just to clarify a few of the steps. So we should have that back to staff tomorrow, and then it'll be available to share with everybody.
Okay. And then in terms of the public, the open house on Tuesday, that might be more for you, Dave. Have we shared that with, I see one of our residents who I'm assuming would like to attend that in the audience. Have we shared that information with folks yet? I just hadn't seen it.
So at this point, it has been posted on the township website, and then also has been, notice has been provided via the township social media channels as well. We'll do a direct email to that sort of email list service. I can have Katie do that tomorrow. That was not done today. But again, it is on the website. It also was published on social media channels.
And I can share it to the
And,
neighborhood,
yeah, yep,
Facebook pages,
absolutely.
whatever.
Yep.
Just-
And the date and time for that again?
It's this coming Tuesday, the 25th,
Okay.
7 p.m., right here in this room at the Township Building.
Okay.
And that's purely, that's not going to be broadcast anywhere. That's a physical location, going to be there in person to see stuff.
Correct, yeah. An opportunity for folks to come out, look at the plans and kind of the exhibits up close, ask any questions, and similar to the first open house, welcome to have everybody come out.
And I think previously, this might, Dave, again for you, I think we posted those plans on the township website previously, the older versions post, and, as follow-up to that workshop or open house, we put them up on the website. So
Yeah,
we'll probably do that again.
happy to do that. Yep.
Just to make sure, okay. Otherwise, just looking at the dates, we're getting kind of close to when the Conservation District should say if they have any comments or not. Has there been any word from them yet on anything?
For Highland Drive?
Yeah.
That one is going in this week to the Conservation District, so they will have,
Oh,
I would
it's
say
only
maybe
gone
2
to-
weeks. Yeah,
Only the GP is going in.
correct, yeah. And we should have that to the Conservation District. We would expect by tomorrow or Friday at the latest. And they typically have about a 2-week turnaround for projects that we coordinate with.
Okay. And, okay, I think I'm done for now.
Good. Okay, awesome. I'm not seeing any public comment, which is good. Again, if you have any, feel free to come on up and wait at the podium. Moving on to finance, this would be agenda item 8A. Consider acceptance of the financing proposal for the purchase of a 2023 Chevy 6500 HD truck. This is a budgeted item. The purchase was authorized at the Board of Supervisors meeting on April 17th.
Yes, happy to address this, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Consistent with the authorization that was granted at that same meeting, the Township Finance Department did issue a request for finance proposals to a number of banks. We ended up getting 5 responses to the request for proposals. TD Bank, M&T Bank, Penn Community Bank, Univest, and William Penn Bank. And so this evening, we are recommending acceptance of the TD Bank proposal for a 4-year term with semi-annual payments at an annual cost of, the rate is at 5.77%. The annual cost is $36,652.38. That amount is sort of consistent with the modeling that's been done in terms of the cash flow modeling related to the road equipment fund. So that would be our recommendation this evening.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions?
Dave, I'm just looking at the table. The number you quoted is a hair different than what's in the table. Do we have, in the motion, do we have to be specific to the number? I just want to make sure we're quoting the right one.
So TD Bank, semi-annual payment frequency, 4 years.
4 years?
5.77% at a total annual cost of $36,652.38. Is that,
I'm seeing 36,939.84. It's on the it's on the cover page of the PDF that's in the report.
let me just look at
Wait,
the actual.
it's semi-annual, let me go back. Say your number again?
36,652.38.
For a total cost of 146,609.52?
That is correct, yep.
4 years, okay. I got it.
We're good?
My glasses are not strong enough.
You need, there's a little thing, that'll increase the size. So,
My IT skills
Yeah,
are,
it was right, right?
yeah, oh,
Okay.
oh, boy. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you
On to
very much.
agenda item 9A.
Jim Majewski's going to come up to address 9A.
Good evening. The township had solicited proposals from several engineering firms to provide engineering services to effectuate the implementation of the signal improvements for the Green Light Go grant program that we obtained a few years ago. This is for the intersection of Pine Grove Road and Big Oak Road. We received 3 proposals for the engineering services, which included topographic survey, engineering design, bid specifications, and accessible ramp designs that are required for PennDOT in order to do that. Based on our review of the proposals submitted by the township traffic engineer and township staff, we recommend that the contract professional services be awarded to Bowman Consulting Group Limited in the amount of $34,100.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
Jim, was Bowman, I'm not familiar with Bowman, I'm familiar with the other firm or firms that submitted scopes. Were they previously another firm, or is that just
Yes.
they were?
They were previously McMahon and
Okay.
Associates.
Yeah.
So this is right in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
They do these like, in their sleep almost. So we feel this is a very good proposal for
I'm
us.
familiar with McMahon
Yeah.
and history doing this type of work, so I wasn't, when I didn't recognize their name, I was kind of surprised, but now it makes sense.
All right, not hearing any comments additional. I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
9B.
So the next item for the board's consideration relates to the Taylorsville Road Improvement Project. There is a scope of services in your packet from RVE, the township engineer, totaling an amount of $181,800. Perhaps, Isaac, if you could just sort of review the proposal and sort of the various components of the proposal for the board, that would be appreciated.
My pleasure, thank you. The project involves the curbing, sidewalk, stormwater that's been discussed for Taylorsville Road, about 2,000 linear feet from just south of the interchange with 295 down to the municipal line with Yardley Borough. Our proposal is separated into a few phases, just to better describe the different work phases for a project such as this, starting with field survey and property boundaries. It follows with the grant application preparation for the DCD MTF grant that we know we're looking to go after for the end of July. Part of that would be that phase 3, which is preliminary design, putting together the engineering plans that would partially be included with the grant, and then also moving into the permitting applications that would be done with the agencies that are involved with the project. It's a PennDOT road, so everything will have to go through PennDOT. And then the stormwater with DCNR and the DEP discharging additional stormwater into the system that would be the Delaware Canal and kind of the surrounding stormwater. We have a phase 4 identified as township meetings. That includes open house style public meetings, similar to how we've done with other projects. We look to do that with the residents for this project as well. Project meetings with property owners that might be affected. And we have meetings with the agencies as these permit applications go in. The fifth phase of the proposal is permitting itself, the agencies that were mentioned there, and the approval processes that are involved with each of those. It also includes the County Conservation District, who will have a look at the erosion and sediment controls for the project. And then following those items, there's the final design, the specifications and cost estimates that go into that final package. We have our QA/QC process that is in place for all our engineering projects and deliverables. With the completed bid package, the final phases involve bidding of the project, the preparation of the contracts, and construction management and inspection. So it really has, beginning to end, all the scope described for this project as a whole.
So moved.
Second. Any comments or questions?
I would, yeah, unless,
I'll go first.
go for it.
So this starts at Mapleville and Taylorsville and goes to where? All the way to
All the way down
McKinley.
to the
McKinley?
border, yep, McKinley, with the
Okay.
Yardley Borough. So it will actually connect with the borough project that brings sidewalk up to that same intersection from the other side.
Yeah. In general, I think this is a very important project because it does help us with stormwater management. It also delivers connectivity for neighbors in the Mapleville area so that they can actually walk all the way to Yardley Borough if they chose. So that is important for two reasons in terms of its connectivity and such. So I'm very supportive of it. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I think, from a project perspective, we've been talking about this for a long time. It does have multiple big positives from a stormwater management perspective, from a connectivity perspective, from a safety perspective, first and foremost. I think, just reiterating everything you're saying, it also helps that Yardley Borough is in their final phases of putting their sidewalk on the same side of the street. So we'll have greater connectivity there, guaranteed. All that's great. It's not just Mapleville, it's everyone really in the north part of
Yep.
town, because there are interconnections through various neighborhoods that connect right there. So I think all that's very, very positive, and, there's deadlines to meet the there's timelines and deadlines to meet the grant application requirements. So that's really what we want to be shooting for, I think, to get that, to make sure that, we set ourselves up for success and for state funding. From a specific, that's all super positive stuff, 100% support this project, and probably blue in the face saying it, how much I support this project over the several months. I guess the question I would have for Township Manager is, we're seeing phases proposed for here through basically construction and inspection. I don't know, when I look at this, I don't know that we need to take it that far at this point. I think phase 1, 2, and 3, which could actually, you might be able to flip-flop phase 2 and 3 in terms of the timeline, the way you look at how they get done, which is basically getting you through preliminary design so that you can then submit the grant application. That's
Right.
absolutely what we need. I'm wondering if we were to, and we've done this recently with other
Sure.
proposals, where we'll approve execution of the first 3 phases. I think 3 phases would probably be sufficient in this case. And then as things progress relative to grant reviews and other reviews and other things we need to do, we can assess whether, one, some of those phases may need to be altered, because that happens a lot with these conceptual projects that then move to more detailed design, or 2, we have moved a bit more, which I personally support, towards RFPing detailed design aspects of the project. Now, in this case, I know RV has done pretty much all the design for Yardley Borough, so it should not be a heavy lift, so I would expect if we RFP'd it, they'd respond and give us a great price on it. But we also want to make sure that I lean towards going through that process regardless, just to see, and to
Sure.
make sure that QA, QC occurs, et cetera. So any thoughts on that from Township Manager?
No, I mean, clearly, in terms of the priority in terms of time is the MTF application. So I think you're accurate in saying that phases 1, phases 2, and, potentially the entirety of phase 3 would sort of best position us to be in a position to submit an application that is sufficiently detailed in order to show that, the project is constructible, it's feasible, and so forth. I guess, Isaac, just in terms of, to the extent that the board was interested in sort of authorizing the first 3 phases of the project, do you believe that the entirety of phase 3 would be required, or do you think that perhaps a portion of the effort that's contemplated as part of phase 3 would be sufficient for purposes of the application?
My opinion is if we were going to, I guess, draw a line of where we wanted to pause and resume at a later time, the phases aren't necessarily sequential. They're in general order of the project, but the work that would be done with PennDOT and the permitting agencies, which is basically one of the longer lead items, to have it ready for construction upon the grant being, hopefully received probably in the fall, after it goes in July. I would say and recommend that it be done up through that permitting phase. And then if you wanted to, I guess, take another look or pause and assess for the final design, and then when it goes to a construction phase, that's completely understandable. But I think that not having those meetings with the permitting agencies and having those applications or the permit submissions go in kind of while you're waiting to hear from the grant, I believe that would just cause delay with the overall project. So to answer the manager's question, as far as the effort to put in the grant application at the end of July, that would be the first 3 phases as they're described here, including the preliminary design. But I would recommend the meetings and the permitting look to be moved forward as well, just to have that as a shovel-ready project when grant funding hopefully does come in, and you can continue to move to constructing the project.
Yeah, then I can, Robert's rules here, can make an amendment to propose an amendment to the motion to authorize phases 1 through 5. Would you need a second to the amendment?
You would need a second,
Yeah.
I'll second. I'll second. All those, was there discussion on the amendment?
So, I mean, I don't think it saves us any time, or I don't think there's any need to authorize the remainder. I'd also, some of the items here I think will likely change. I'm also looking at phase 9 is called out specifically as QA/QC. I've actually never seen that in a proposal where QA/QC is called out as its own phase. That's usually built in along the way. That's just part of the process of developing plans. I just think we should, as we move forward, we should take another look at how this is set up if we're going to proceed in this direction.
And there's also the potential that we don't receive the grant as well, so.
Right.
If that's, any other discussion on the amendment? Not hearing any, all those in favor of the amendment to the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, with that, any on the broader motion, before we approve, do we have a rough idea of the amount if we do 1 through 5?
With 1 through 5, which would take it through the permitting coordination up until the final design phase, $87,750.
Okay. I'll call the question then on the motion then, as amended to reflect the phases and amount. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay.
I would like to congratulate you, though, Matt. I know this was something that you said you wanted to get done when you were elected, and I appreciate all the work that you put into bringing this to fruition.
Thanks.
Moving on to agenda item 9C.
So the next item, as the chair noted, is 9C. We're seeking authorization to advertise an ordinance to amend a specific provision within the tree replacement requirements that are contained within the subdivision land development ordinance. The change is the current provision requires adjustment to this fee on a once every 3-year basis. We're recommending a change in that provision to provide for annual adjustment of the fee that would be paid to the extent that a party developing a property is not able to replant on the site in which the disturbance or the tree disturbance is occurring. This is an item, I know we have a member of the EAC here this evening. This is an item that is also being recommended by the EAC. So
moved.
Second? Any questions?
Yeah, I have one. I know that when we first had a tree ordinance, however many years ago that was, there had been a delay, or maybe the township hadn't been ensuring that it was part of the annual fee adjustments that were done, and this board, or a version of this board, took care of that. I also know that there has been a lot of discussion in years past at the EAC about whether or not the caliber trees that we're requesting are appropriate, and some language came up, and dare I reference tree conversation we once had, because, you know, putting in big trees isn't always the answer. They don't always survive as well. And so I know that the EAC had done work on adjusting the caliber of trees, or at least giving more flexibility, but I don't see that reflected in this ordinance. So I'm wondering if we should pause, because I know there's advertisement, et cetera, and get it all right, or as complete the first time.
Jim, do you have any sort of background on that or information relative to that discussion that may have occurred?
Yeah, there was some discussion on trees and how we could take care of that. This right here is a simple, kind of like a fee adjustment, basically. But we should push that other
Oh,
one forward.
they can't hear you?
Push it forward.
I thought we had a caller. There we go.
Here we go. I think that's the microphone. So there had been some discussion about adjusting the size of trees that we plant. I don't believe we came to a conclusion on that ultimately. This amendment is purely, it's basically a fee adjustment, as we've done with other fees throughout the year and yearly, to do it on a yearly basis rather than every 3 years. We could go circle back and get that other amendment at another time, I think, for all the trees changes.
So, I mean, I'm not sure, like, if there's an immediate, like, if we're about to have something and we want to get this on the books, then all for it, but I would prefer that we not advertise this one and then come back in a few months if, and on Jim, if you can, not you, Jim, you, Jim, if you can speak to the concept of, although I think Jim actually likes the big trees, we need Linda. I summon
And
other
just-
EAC members.
And just in terms of urgency, so that, just so the board is aware, so the current fee, which is sort of the starting point for the proposed ordinance, the current fee, irrespective of this change, is still $374. So there's nothing going to be effectuated in terms of the amount here, because the adjustment occurred, it just so happened occurred, was it this year or that, or?
I forget if it was this year or last year.
So that number is still the relevant number, if you will. So to the extent that there was an application, say next week, and there was tree disturbance, the 374 is what's reflected in your current adopted fee schedule.
Dave, off the top of your head, roughly, what do we have in the tree bank?
Do you remember what that number was?
I've been spending it a lot.
Have you?
Jim and I are
I know
planting
we're
trees
looking at
everywhere.
an accounting of that, and
Hold on, if you can give me 1 second, James, I can pull it up.
and I know we just got another check for more money in the tree bank, so I forget where we stand before or after. Keep getting money and planting trees, so that.
Yeah, so
Two
as
good
of June 10th, the fund balance in the tree bank fund was $268,222.64. And I've asked finance to provide an accounting for purposes of essentially a balance sheet showing deposit and essentially a deposit detail. So they're in the process of working on that. But based on the number that they had given me on the 10th, it was $268,222.64.
How many trees? Oh, I was going to ask that next. So about 716 trees. Are we planning on planting 716 trees in the next 5 or 10 years?
But
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, the EAC is planning to have a long-term plan to plant about 1,000 trees throughout the township.
Okay.
And year by year, just slowly implementing that plan.
Rather than buying, and I think that I've made this suggestion before, rather than buying, middle-sized or mid-sized trees at a certain price point, has the EAC looked at planting smaller trees at Patterson Farm and then transplanting them to the location that they need?
Yeah, we actually looked at that with Tom Committa, who's doing our long-range tree planting plan, and looking at the various sites and restrictions on it. I think we were looking at what they call the chimney at Memorial Park, the area way in the back, sort of making that as a nursery type area. And I think the park board was okay with that, and as well as the EAC.
Cool. What was the price per tree that you just did? $76?
Suzanne, I might be able to help you with your question. Okay.
And that is Jim Bray, a Lower Makefield Township
No, I'm sorry,
resident.
Jim, my name is Jim Bray, and I live in Lower Makefield Township, and I am the current chair of the Environmental Council. So the way it actually works, and I believe these statistics are already in the Saldo ordinance, there's a replacement basis, replacement caliper basis, based upon the size of the tree that's cut down. Firstly, when developers cut down trees in developing property in Lower Makefield Township, there's a tree replacement standard that takes place. And the way it works is if it's a 10-inch caliper tree, they have to replace that with 4 2.5-inch caliper trees. Now, the reason we've selected 2.5-inch caliper trees is based upon dealings with nurseries over the years and finding out what size tree gives you your best bang for your buck. If you plant a 5-inch tree, it's much more expensive, and the 2.5-inch tree, because of the relationship of root mass to top growth, catches up in about 3 years. So 2.5-inch was what we chose based upon, good information. Now, as the tree caliper increases, that's cut down, the number of replacement trees increases as well. So, for instance, if it's an 18-inch tree, it might be 6 or 8 replacement trees that are required. And I believe that information is already in our ordinance.
No, that is definitely there, but I do recall that there was some conversation about making it a little bit more flexible. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so to your point, there were some, we did have a discussion, I supported this because it's part of the day job, and it's very true, not in that if, when we're looking at potentials, where the different projects, depending on the species and all those nuances, sometimes trees can be less successful when you get a big 3-inch baldwin burlap or something like that, right? Whereas if you go with a higher number of smaller trees, you'll usually have greater success over the long term because there's less stress. That's very generalized comment, but we had that conversation a year or two ago at this point. I think everyone supported that in concept. Some devil's in the details, obviously, but I think everyone supported that in concept. I don't know that it ever moved forward, but it's something that we
Well, at the
could.
risk of getting John all excited, it
Yeah.
is actually included in the let us plant some non-native trees. Oh my gosh, I mentioned it, resolution, but those that work on different
Yeah,
calibers was included in
I
that.
recall.
Yeah, so I
that's
think
one-
we could lift it from there, see if there's still agreement, leaving the non-native tree part out of it.
Yeah, I just try not to bring it up to
Yep,
keep it a happy meeting.
and
Yeah.
then advertise it all at once, but I'll stop talking.
So are they,
Promise.
just so I'm clear, are they part of the exact same ordinance, or are they separate ordinances? Or is this, to your point, Jim Majewski, is this something, the ordinance has a specific number, so we have, and a specific period of change or of reevaluation that we have to update the ordinance versus just updating a fee within our annual fee schedule during budget season?
Yeah, they're sort of unrelated, but, obviously they're all trees, so it's all related in Saldo.
It's all in the same
They're all in
same
178,
ordinance.
It's all
but
in
not
all
necessarily
chapters,
H. I think it
178.
starts
Same
D
section,
through G, yeah.
Yeah, and the number that's in there is 2.5-inch caliper. Now, in the real world, sometimes they come in at 2, sometimes they come in
Yeah,
at
it's
3.
nursery dependent,
Because,
yeah.
you have different specs, and what does the grower have at a specific time?
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, we've also planted, in order to get community members involved, much smaller trees, like 1-inch trees. So we have done this in the past in
Yeah.
some of the parks, because to have community involvement involved in these plantings is really important. And you can't get community involvement in 2.5-inch trees because of the size of them.
Yeah, 3 inches is pretty big. But yeah, I think, I'm on board with making the edits. I don't know how much, we're not gonna lose any, we're not gonna lose, to your
there's-
earlier point, we're not gonna lose any money on anything if we wait.
We're
to
not,
update some
we're not.
stuff.
So to the extent that there's a more sort of comprehensive look at this issue, again, there's not going to be any monetary impact to the township in 2024. So if we can, we do have some time.
Well, when this ordinance actually passed, the tree bank, this was one of the ideas that the EAC had, but at that time, it was kind of vague as to where, when a developer couldn't put in trees, where they were going to be put, okay? So in about 2012 or 13, we clarified that. And when we clarified that, we also came up with a specific value for a tree. And what we wanted to do at the time is use the CPI and have that value increased every year. But we got some static from it at the time because they thought it was going to be an administrative issue. So, you get what you can get at a different time, so we agreed to the 3. But then recently, we brought up this matter again, and now the current board is much more receptive. This is the right thing to do. It's easy to administer. It's not really a big deal.
Generally, I think it's just easier to update fees every year, so you're not trying to track when you're supposed to update
Right.
one versus another, so just practically, I think administratively is probably easier than.
Yeah, and
every 3 years.
I think there was some administrative confusion that occurred in terms of the timing of the update previously. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's confusion.
So
By me.
I think your point about annual adjustment from an administrative standpoint is easier, yes.
Is there a caller on the line? Okay, the light is on, which is why I asked. I quite frankly, because it's just fixing this one thing, I say let's fix it and then go back and look if we think we want to restructure caliper size and stuff. Would everybody be okay if we just get it off the list and then we can come back?
Yeah.
So, do we have a motion on this?
I would just point out the calibers have been on the list for like 2.5 years.
But we have a motion made second, so if that's the case, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay.
One last quick comment. The EAC has a lot of tree expertise on board, and regarding Susan's proposal, if the board starts getting into that, we would certainly help in any way that we could.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
Thanks, Joey.
pardon?
Thanks, Joey.
Okay. We'll move on to,
When he says my name wrong, I say his name wrong. It's a game we play.
You got Suzanne right 3 times in a row.
I know, and then I annoyed you and we switched.
all right. As noted previously, we're removing item 9D and moving on to 9E.
So both 9E and 9F relate to changes that previously were presented to the Board of Supervisors regarding sort of quick fixes to the township's stormwater management ordinance. The reason they're 2 separate items and 2 separate ordinances is because of the way that things are currently organized in terms of separate chapters. But again, these are sort of the quick fix recommendations of HRG, who's doing the consulting work for us, that you had previously seen and authorized the advertisement of these respective ordinances. So they're both fundamentally the same, just different watersheds.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. Just by way of disclosure, there was a recent planning commission meeting. We talked about the eventual final version of this. It's likely these 2 will be combined into one comprehensive ordinance to cover both watersheds, among other stuff that they're still working through right now. So we haven't stopped that process, but we wanted to get this as the initial one in. Any other comments or questions? And Supervisor Blundy and Supervisor McCartney, this does contain the edits you had previously, so.
Thank you.
It's the version you had worked on. Not seeing comments, questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 It passes. 9F.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, I'm going to call the question. I don't see any comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. 9G, general update.
I have no update this evening. Happy to address any questions that the board may have regarding anything.
Moving on to agenda item 10A, which is Parks and Recreation.
About time for one of these. Yeah.
Did we get this working? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so today I'm asking the board to consider acceptance of rubberized service proposal of $306,400.53 from Soft Service for Memorial Park. The 2024 budget was $330,000, but that also included shade structures.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? So this is below the budget amount. I know we had some discussion about shade elements and some other stuff that folks with questions at all?
Yeah, so Monica, because I was asking about this from
Sure.
our manager, the budget amount was to include shade structures, but my microphone is not on, thank you for the light. The budgeted amount for 330 was to include shade structures originally, but the proposals came back significantly higher than that in the
Yeah,
400 plus
now,
range for-
now there were island shade structures I looked at, smaller shade structures, that would be a lot less, which might even be possible this year. But recently, we had seen what was done in Bristol Township, and we feel that that might be more of what we need to be able to accommodate the public at large, which would be a little bit more higher of a price, but more benefits the community. So that's the quote that you saw in the email from David.
Okay. How many, what I would call significant park and rec, maintenance upgrade type projects are, I know that we were talking about the basketball court not that long ago. This one, there's probably some others that are in the several $100,000 range at this point. How many of those do we have right now?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call them upgrades, more repairs. This is equipment that we have that's failing or beyond their useful life. The one upgrade would be the Memorial Park project that's on the east side. That is a grant project that we have $900,000 towards, but these projects are to repair items that are beyond their useful life.
Right.
Or
So how many of those do we have, do you think?
Well, quite a few of them. I mean, there's projects that hadn't been getting done for years, so we're trying to catch up now.
I guess my point is, I guess, this is a $300,000 plus project, looking using bond funds. So we have, we can only use bond funds for so many different things. I kind of want to take a step back, get a list of all those projects and other types of things that we could use bond funds on, and say, okay, let's prioritize these things to see which one, because there's some we talked about, but then we kind of pulled back on, some we moved forward. And I don't have a clear picture as to which ones we absolutely need to do now versus which ones we could hold off on, and what the total values are. I know I was at this one a couple weeks ago for a birthday party. We were out there. My concern is that we spend $300,000 putting the new rubberized surfaces down there, but then it's still exposed to the sun for quite some time before we can find some money for shade structures, and then rubber breaks down in the sun and things fall apart again. I'd just like to take a step. Personally, I don't know that I can vote in favor of this one this evening, not that it's not needed or wanted. I just need a better picture of other projects, because I just see a lot of park and rec projects where we need, like you said, we need to move on them, and I just want to make sure we're doing the right ones first.
Sure. I mean, I'll tell you, this one, and particularly the basketball ones, are probably two of the higher need projects, and the facts that, we're at a place where we're a little bit unsafe. We're looking at divots and cracking, and no one will patch a playground because they don't want to put their name on it. So this type of material, like this tile type, if we put that down, that's something that is warranted, and we're able to replace just one tile at a time, and we can add to the longevity of the surface. That's why we kind of went this route. When I saw this, I was like, oh, this is something that we can really manage long term versus having a solid rubberized surface that would require patching when no one will patch. So
Do we get a cost on a solid rubberized surface, just for comparison?
it would be a little less, but it's actually kind of comparable.
No, I'm just.
Yeah, it's not that far off in price.
Yeah, one question I had, and this predates your arrival, and I think all of us, because it was done many, many years ago when the original surface was in. The company that did that, we had issues, I think 6 years in on the surface, but they were no longer in business. So the Sol Surfaces folks, how long have they been in business? So they've been,
I
will they
believe
be
it's
here?
over 25 years they've been in business.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been around for a while. It's 20 or 25 years. It's over 20.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned, or you just sent warranty information. I don't know if you want to sort of share that verbally with the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I do have printouts too, if you want to see these. So as far as a warranty, it's 0 to 6 years is 100% replacement warranty. After 6 years is 50% replacement warranty. Of course, if it's some kind of damage to a great storm or something like that, that's, not included. So they have a pretty significant warranty. The great thing is the manufacturer would be installing it for us, so there's no third party or no one else to point blame at. We could go right back to the manufacturer for replacement, which is very nice. That's not usual. But they do install their own product. So, there are a lot of great things. I did a lot of research on this it seems as though most places that go to the tile type system end up using the tile system in every one of the parks. There was a park, and I forget what township it was, I'm very sorry, but in New Jersey, that has switched. They've been using them 6 or 7 years now, and I liked talking to them because they have the same type weathering patterns as we have, and it was really nice to hear how great it's been for them. But for instance, they did, maybe a year or two after installing one of the surface, someone spilled paint all over the surface. They were able to easily, through their public works or maintenance staff, take out those couple pieces of tile and replace them, and it looked like new, and it was perfectly intact. So I know I sound like a salesperson, but they kind of sold me on the product. So, I just think this is a really great, it's a win-win for the township as we can make it last longer.
With the tile structure, does it have the same buoyancy that the current one has? And I haven't been on it in probably, well, not recently, but there's a
It's
bounce.
an 8-foot drop.
Huh?
Yeah, 8-foot drop. And to be honest, I'm not a playground certified inspector, but all the required safety protocols are in place. So you have to be able to fall from a certain height.
So
I
which
was on
one
a
of
few
us is
weeks
going to drop from 8 feet then?
I don't know that I dropped from 8 feet.
I'll be
There's
happy to
two
drop
that are
either
8
of
feet
you
up.
from 8 feet.
There's a little rock wall that you could
Yeah.
jump out. I've jumped and fallen off of those, and it's
Yeah.
pretty buoyant. It's
Yeah.
bouncy.
No, I'll be honest, I've spent a fair amount of time on it over the years, and it is very unique in terms of its bounciness, and is an important asset, so.
It's
I'm
very, very hot, especially this
Yeah.
week. That's-
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, just to
every-
sort of provide some information, so again, this is a budgeted item of the sort of budgeted capital items that are in the adopted 2024 budget. There are, let's see, that are park-related. There's Heacock Pocket Park. This project, the Memorial Park Shade Structure Rubberized Surface Project, and if you want to throw it in, the pool filter replacement using 2016 bond proceeds. Other sort of planned park and rec projects are using restricted funds, so park and rec fee in lieu of, which again can't be used for other purposes. So those are the items that are contemplated as part of the adopted 2024 budget.
And Dave, just to pull on that a little bit, when you say fee in lieu can't be used, right, that's one of the fun facts of Pennsylvania. Fee in lieu will only allow you to do new things. It won't let you use the money to fix things you have, correct?
That has changed, actually.
Oh, we
So
all learn.
the MPC does permit use of fee in lieu of for maintenance. So you can use that for maintenance. But my point is that, of sort of the generally usable funds that is really coming out of the 2016 bond proceeds, those are the projects that are contemplated in 2024.
So on the fee in lieu then, if we looked at those projects as well, fee in lieu funds could be used for this, or something akin to this, or the basketball court or something like that, to address maintenance issues. That's what we're hearing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yes. And some of these fee in lieu of projects likely are not going to occur in 2024. So those were drainage issues relative to the pickleball court, the MTF local match for bike path gap project. I don't think that was funded. I don't think we received that funding. So that's, again, that was sort of contingent upon grant receipt. I think those are generally it. So in terms of funding this project, there's likely the potential of using essentially a combination of sources. I think you could use
You're anticipating my
park and
question.
rec fee in lieu of in combination with whatever is necessary out of the 16 bond proceeds to advance this project and and still preserve the flexibility or maintain additional 2016 bond proceeds to be used for other projects.
So that's where I'm going with all this. So to our solicitor, since during our budget vote, we spoke about how we would fund certain things. That doesn't force us to use 2016 bond funds on this or fee in lieu on some other project. It's just, since they're both something that could apply to this, we can move that around and pick and choose. Okay.
You should be able to pick and choose.
Okay, so I would be okay funding this using fee in lieu, Park and Rec fee in lieu funds, as they're designed to be used. But I would like because of some other things potentially coming up, I would like to be flexible to be able to preserve the 16 bond funds on other things that we.
Yeah, I mean,
where we may
the
have
other sort of big, and I forgot to mention, there is another, the Memorial Park East expansion, which again is the project that Monica had mentioned, that we have received a $900,000 grant from the Commonwealth. There was $310,000 of Park and Rec fee in lieu of. So again, depending on sort of how that project advances, or if that project advances, my point is there's some capacity in the Park and Rec fee in lieu of account that could accommodate this immediate item that's before you.
But the way we're saying, is there any way to make an amendment to the motion and make sure that we only fund it if we use fee in lieu funds?
I don't think the motion actually contemplates the source of funding. So, and I apologize, but I think it was a so moved, or, right? So it was, yeah. So it's consider the acceptance of the rubberized surface proposal for Memorial Park. So the budget, which fund that comes from, is not part of the motion, so it's not necessarily mandated. I would need a ruling from the solicitor on that.
It's in the budget.
Yeah.
It's in the budget, I would be okay voting for it if and only if it's funded through the fee in lieu. If it's funded through bond funds, then I would probably vote against it, just because I think we need those monies for other things. That's where I'm at.
Right, but the motion doesn't specify which fund, so
that's right,
if you
right.
want to amend the motion, you could then amend the motion to specify that.
2 amendments in one day. Sure. I would like to amend the motion to specify that this project be funded solely through the Park and Rec fee in lieu fund.
Were you the maker of the motion?
No,
It-
Yeah, I
it
think I
doesn't-
am.
It doesn't matter, though. Robert's
Yeah.
rules, you don't need to.
No, you have to convince me to accept your amendment to my motion, and I don't think you're going to succeed.
I don't think that's the rule. I think that's what our prior solicitor directed us to do, but I don't think that's the rule per Robert's rules.
There is a motion with a second. You can't just throw another motion out
You can
there.
throw an amendment in there. Per Robert's rules, you can, right? Is it to our solicitor? That's how I've read it in the past.
We just did it prior to, so.
Yeah.
So whatever the rules are, I'm happy to follow them.
Yeah, I think you raised, I think, this issue before. I think we did look at that, and I don't think that, my understanding is that you can't, like, filibuster an amendment as the maker of the original motion.
That's always been my understanding as well, but, I mean,
No filibustering, Suzanne.
Meaning that the amendment doesn't have to be agreed to. The amendment can be agreed to by the body. The amendment does not, it's not the initial maker of the motion that has sole determination as to whether the board as a body can take action on an amendment.
Or that it continues as stated, correct.
So there'd be up or down vote on the
Yeah.
amendment.
and then you
Yes.
vote on the amendment, then you vote on
Yeah.
the original motion, and you move forward. So either win or
Yes.
lose.
We'll get this right.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment to the primary motion specifying that the source of the budgeted money is the Park and Rec fee in lieu of fund, signify by saying aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Noes?
Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay. Then the amendment passes. The broader motion is now on the table. I'm not seeing any public comment.
I have a couple questions,
Sure.
actually. So what color are we looking at?
There's a layout design in your packet, so those are the colors. They kind of flow with what our current design is. It's just more
Not a lot of
boxy.
Eagles green in there. I'm a little
You want-
disappointed.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Red and blue.
I'm sure, yeah, there's a lot of red and blue. I'm a little worried. So how does this, and you've done the research, so how does the material react during hot spells? Like this last week has been brutal. Does it render it unusable because of the lack of shade?
Well, I think everything is unusable right now because of the heat. But it'll be hot. It's a hot plate. It'll be hot like a normal rubberized surface.
Okay. And then my other question is will the company be spending time with somebody in our maintenance department to actually walk through how it is we maintain these things? Because I was looking at the warranty, and there is some verbiage in there as far as if you don't properly maintain it, it voids the warranty like anything else. So will there be somebody from the company that actually will come out and spend time with the maintenance people?
They will, and
Okay.
they have already met with Derek. Derek went out with me on site with the vendor, and I wanted to have his opinion on the product, and he feels very comfortable that it'd be something that our staff could do, no problem.
Cool. And I think it's the Durasafe is the material, right? Is
Yeah,
that what it's
yes,
called?
this is the material.
Cool.
You-
So
you
Derek
wanna-
said you
Do you
can
want to
drop.
pass it around?
Yeah.
Yes.
Derek said you can safely drop 2 supervisors from a height of 8 feet, and they would be okay, right? Just for the record.
Which two are you planning on?
I'm not saying anything.
And they will be putting curbing all the way around to kind of hold it tight.
Oh,
I know, not-
jeez.
Yeah, they're no joke.
Oh, my God.
So, James, while you're pausing, Monica, this is the diagram that I received. Yeah. It's pretty badass. Yeah, but I can't tell what color these are.
Here, I have one too.
But my only comment would be that, I have family members who are colorblind, and red is not a color that most colorblind people can see. So as long as we're focused on a park that's meant for people who are differently abled, if we could try not to,
Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
How does it?
so let us not do this,
Probably a-
because most,
one of the other ones.
red and green are the colors that
Yeah.
colorblind people are most,
So no green,
often they
James?
can't see. Well, Eagles green might actually be like blue, I'm not sure.
I know.
But if you could please,
Yeah, you
be
got it.
mindful of that. Thank you.
I won't be
Red and
doing
blue looks great.
Did you listen to me? No red.
I was too excited.
Most people are colorblind. for those colors.
Enough or not, I think we're all interested in seeing what we can get for shade structures in a fairly short order because of what it's like out there
Yes.
on a regular basis. Even if, who knows, maybe it's, talking about trees tonight, if there's a way to get a tree plant around there too, that might help. Be interesting,
Yeah.
as everyone's looking at their.
What?
I'm just talking as everyone's looking at
Oh,
the
okay.
Okay,
stuff.
With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amended motion as discussed signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes 5-0. Moving on to the solicitor's report. This is 11A.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minutes should reflect that the supervisors present this evening met in executive session immediately prior to this meeting to discuss employment issues in potential and existing litigation matters. The first thing on my report is 11A, consider approval of the anti-discrimination ordinance, which was before you last meeting. This ordinance was properly noticed. Notices went to the Bucks County Law Library as required and was properly advertised, so it is before you this evening for a vote.
So moved.
Second.
Any comment?
I'm
Hearing none?
just happy we're here.
Yep.
And
I think there's probably public comment.
Public comment, come on down. Just as always, please give your name and that you're a Lower Makefield resident or
Wait,
not.
it's before 9 o'clock, no.
I know, I'm very impressed. Kathy Hanville, I am an LMT resident. We'll keep it brief. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for getting it done in Pride Month. That's really exciting. I did have one question about why you were naming the chair, which is not something I think you do with other commissions. like, I'm on the historical commission, and we vote Joe in every time because nobody else wants to do the work. But in the ordinance, it said that the board would pick the chair.
I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you. We followed through with what had been sort of discussed and sort of vetted out prior to, and that's how it was presented, and I don't think it was ever raised before this. Do you find it to be problematic, or?
It just seems a little controlling, and I don't really want to delay this, but at the same time, it's not in line with everything else, and this is the weird thing that you guys had it here last time, but we couldn't see it ahead of time, so I couldn't comment on it last time. So
I will say that it is consistent with most, it is almost a model ordinance. It's very similar to other ordinances, not only throughout this area, but throughout the state, with school districts, et cetera. So it is not, it is not that unusual.
yeah, it wasn't in any of the ones I read, but I did not read them all.
And the body, once constituted, could immediately reconstitute itself and pick a new.
Okay.
So,
Well, that
Correct.
answers that question. Thank you, Suzanne. My only other comment was, I know in some places, and it looks like maybe in Yardley Borough being one of them, they use this commission just to hear any complaints, which we're all, I'm sure, hoping that there aren't any complaints. I would also like to advocate that the commission can be used for other things. I was on one of these commissions in California, and we did educational events, and I know Mr. McCarthy was concerned about money too, but I think you can do that in a way that's reasonable and not going to strain the budget and using community resources. So I just want to, kind of put that on the record too. So again, thank you, and I'm sure you'll enjoy not me coming to every single meeting.
Please, yeah. Okay. I'm just impressed with your T-shirt collection.
Yeah. Any other public comment? Not seeing any. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item 11B.
Just for the record, Mr. Chair, I'm not opposed to any, I'm opposed actually to any anti-discriminatory behavior in the township. I'm concerned about a Human Relations Committee doing hearings, overseeing anything that happens in the township. I think it's a slippery slope, so just wanted to add that.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 11B.
11B is a consideration for the board's approval of an open space referendum. I believe it's in your packet. Simply stated, it is a resolution under Local Government Unit Debt Act to authorize the incurrence of a sum up to $15 million for the purpose of financing the acquisition of interest in or improvements to real property for open space, including but not limited to the preservation of environmentally sensitive areas and open space for agricultural and conservation easements, natural resources, historic land, active and passive recreation, and cultural purposes.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second to get the discussion started.
Okay.
Let's get it started. I just have a general question. Exactly, and almost going back to what we were talking about with Park and Rec, fee in lieu of, how exactly are we looking to fund this?
So the intent would be that you would fund it through, you have a special purpose
Yeah,
debt service
okay.
tax. So there would be
Yeah.
millage sufficient to support, just like you do now, the principal and interest associated with any debt issuance that's outstanding from, that the township has incurred. So that would be the approach.
Do we have space within our millage to do that at this time?
So there is going to be a drop-off in terms of debt service next year, and then there's, I believe, a further drop-off as well. There is some existing capacity, but again, this goes back to sort of a discussion about other sort of capital needs that exist and how we're going to finance and fund those other capital needs. So I think the presentation that was provided last meeting contemplated that that cap space, the existing capacity with the existing rate, was going to be used for other capital projects, but the board, retains discretion in terms of making that determination when and if you issue debt relative to this purpose or any purpose.
Would that be included in this referendum, though? Any kind of capital improvements wouldn't be included. This is specific to open space, right?
This is both acquisition of open space and then improvement to open space properties is how it's currently written.
Have we done this in the past?
This is exactly the approach that was taken in 2008 by the Board of Supervisors at that time, in which, again, action was not taken. Putting this up at this point to the voters, even if the voters were to say yes, doesn't obligate the township in any fashion. So, for example, in that past example, the issue was there was a resolution adopted in 2008. It went on a ballot in 2008. It was voted for by the voters at that time, and then it wasn't until 2016 that the township was doing other debt issuance at that point, or restructuring of existing debt, that they then designated a portion of that, $5 million, for purposes of open space acquisition. So again, this is a sort of a multi-step process. It's not obligating you to do anything at this point other than essentially ask for the consent of the electorate as to whether this is something that they would support. And then at that point, the Board of Supervisors still retains discretion in terms of what it does after that, depending on the outcome of that.
Is there an expiration on these?
It's a 10-year validity period.
Okay.
So again, if it's on the ballot in 2024, it would be valid until 2034. Yep.
Thank you.
Can I ask some questions?
Sure.
Thank you. Just remind me, please, in terms of timing, because I know that you impressed upon us that we had to, start the ball rolling to make sure we could be on the ballot by November. So when is the last date that we could advertise to meet that?
I will say, because we did change courses as far as how we were going to put this before you, that the 13 Tuesdays, which was reiterated over and over again, is no longer applicable to what's before you this evening. We have the leniency of time, so we have to notify the Board of Electors 45 days prior to the November ballot. Prior to that, then after that, we advertise for 3 successive weeks, so 1 time per week for 3 weeks. So we do have a little bit of time, so we're not under the gun like we were under how we were proposing to promote this before.
Okay, thank you for that. And then, Dave, you had said that if language is adopted and it passes by the voters, that the board would then have discretion, whatever board it is, would have discretion how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that, once it passes, you kind of have to set up the infrastructure. You don't have to actually execute, so we would put the bond, we hire bond counsel, let's say. We would create what was going to be the bond, but then we wouldn't have to actually let the bonds until we were going to spend money. Am I wrong on that? Been wrong at least once tonight, so I can keep it up.
I don't think you would have to do anything at that point, just like, again, the prior board action was taken in 2008. They didn't do anything until 2016.
I did think they set it up. I think my memory, and again, happy to be corrected, was that they put in the structure, but because they did not, for whatever reason, identify how to move forward, it wasn't until they actually went to spend it that they had to take that second step. But that, in fact, my experience, I got a horn and a light. In my experience, again, from New York, and, could be very, very different, is that in order to execute, right, if in fact it passes and the board doesn't do anything, and then an opportunity comes, you can't, snap your fingers and have this thing ready to go. It takes time. So you kind of have to set it up, and that's not cheap, setting it up. It's not crazy expensive.
Again, I'm not sure. I don't think, a typical debt closing can close as quickly as 90 days, and that would be through a bond issuance. So again, this is just authorization under the Local Government Unit Debt Act to designate debt in the future if the board were to incur it to constitute electoral debt, which again doesn't affect your borrowing capacity in any fashion. So I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with that. I don't think there's any obligation that is created by virtue of the passage of this resolution and ultimately the action taken by the voters, from a statutory standpoint. I mean, I think there's some practicality in terms of being responsive, right,
Yeah.
to the extent that you put something before the electorate and there's unanimous support, and then you disregard that position, that may not be a smart, practical thing to do.
No, I'm not talking about that
But
at
I
all.
don't think there's anything statutorily that obligates you to do anything.
Well, I just want people, when this is on the referendum, that people will have as much information to understand what it is they are or are not voting for. So I would disagree with you a little bit that 3 months is a long time and selecting council, blah, 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 is longer than 3 months, but we could argue about that in 2 years.
Yeah. I mean,
And then, have we done any kind of, evaluation? I don't want to, trap anybody with a fancy word, but like, what parcels, how much parcels, what kind of land do we think is out there? Because I know we have a dollar amount associated with the proposed language, and I'm just trying to think about what parcels of land there are still that we could maybe potentially, if we can.
Yeah, I think the EAC did provide some recommendations in terms of potential parcels of interest. Again, at the end of the day, there has to be a willing sort of buyer and seller, right? So, from an execution standpoint, I would probably never advise you to go out and borrow $15 million of money. I would probably take it in increments, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, it may take longer than. I'm just saying, to the extent that you're not going through a competitive sale, you're just going to do direct placement. You have an FA in place, you have bond counsel in place. You could close as quickly as 90 days. I think to the extent that let's just say hypothetically, it all goes through and it's passed. At that point, I think that's when you would start reaching out to property owners, trying to identify property owners. If you identify a large enough, parcel that it makes sense from a transactional cost standpoint to say, okay, well, we have enough here to warrant going to market, then at that point, then you could initiate the process to go to market. If you're talking about a series of small properties, you probably would not incur the transactional cost associated with the debt issuance until you had sufficient mass, basically, to spread those transactional costs across a multitude of deals. So, again, it's providing sort of a basic framework up to $15 million. The Board of Supervisors ultimately decides what that amount is. And you could, in theory, you could borrow more than that. It just wouldn't be designated as electoral debt, and it would take away from your borrowing capacity for other things.
And to that point, there's other ways to borrow, right?
Correct. So again, depending on what we're talking about, and depending how long, I mean, we could, from a structure standpoint, maybe it's not bonds. Maybe we're not going to market and issuing bonds. Maybe you're looking at, a bank loan. Maybe you can get banks to provide you with a $5 million bank loan with drawdown provisions so that you're not incurring interest costs associated with money that's not immediately spendable. So I think there's a lot of sort of structures that can be looked at that, at the time if this was to proceed, and ultimately, we would, from a staff perspective, we would come back and offer a recommendation, and then the board would decide at that point as to what it wants to do.
And the last one that you just talked about, the, getting a line of credit and drawdown, that's something we could do now if we so chose.
That is correct. So you would have the capacity to borrow without, again, it would be non-electoral debt, and it would take away from your borrowing capacity for other potential capital needs. This would just be a way for you to gauge general community support, and then at that point have the flexibility to issue, more debt up to your debt limit if you chose to do so. This wouldn't take away from any of that. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad, Maureen, that we did pivot to, this different approach that gives us more time to my mind anyway, get some of these answers a little bit more concrete and continue to have the discussion with the public so that people understand what we're talking about, right? James already started talking about, the mills cap and where, for people who don't know, we don't have a lot of choices about the way that we're able to generate, I'll say the term revenue, to fill your potholes or do whatever we'd like to do. It's really basically, mostly comes from property tax, right? And that's those assessments. Some people might not like their assessment, but they have not been changed by the county in, I think we discovered, like, since the mid-'70s.
1972.
Yeah, so 1972, and I was alive. But anyway, moving on. So we're a little bit handcuffed up here. We can't. Okay, you guys weren't alive. I hear you snickering.
If I could enter into the discussion
Absolutely.
slightly. So in 2016, I was on the board at that time, and again, it was 8 years without any action on that. There were a couple different factors in the decisions that we made with respect to the Guzikowski farm, and there was another smaller parcel. At that time, Bucks County had an open space bond referendum and provided municipalities with support for open space funding. That bond referendum, that bond has been closed, meaning that there's no more funds for that. It's possible that the county may, in fact, redo that again and give us more facility for that. In 2016, the access to the canal, I think I'm forgetting, is it Johnson? Or what?
Jennings Tract.
Jennings Tract, thank you. So the Jennings Tract, that was mostly paid for by the county, I believe.
I think 75
80, yeah.
Woods County and
And
Township.
then the Kuzakowski farm, the conservation easement was financed with bonds that we ended up issuing in relatively short order. So it wasn't like the prior board in 2008 had initiated anything. They were waiting for, and I don't want to speak for them, they weren't here, they're not here, but these opportunities don't always come at you, and you can go many years without a reasonable opportunity. What this referendum would allow for is quickly for us to act if one of those opportunities comes up and a significant parcel is available, and Bucks County is not supporting open space purchases, so we would have to do that on our own, or there's not other funds. So this gives us both guidance from the populace as to if that's something they want, and it provides us the flexibility to have electoral debt for this purpose. So it's not encumbering anybody, and it does not immediately increase your taxes or any of those things. And even if it passes, it's very possible that we will not see good opportunities. As you've been on the board many years, you know that those opportunities don't come often, and they're not always clean cut. So, and we're limited, in many cases by what the appraised value of properties are and how we would do that. So all that's to say is I don't want to get people's hopes up that there will be a large purchase soon, because that's not the way properties occur. People make decisions as to when they want to sell their property. They have property rights in the United States and in Pennsylvania. So from that perspective, I don't see a downside or risk. I know some members might want to tweak the language, and I'm open to that discussion, but I would be comfortable with us working that out, possibly. And I know we lose Mr. Kratzer in about 15 minutes. So he has to,
He has 19 minutes.
He has 19 minutes.
I just had one other question for Dave.
Sure.
You guys are talking about electoral debt. Can you just explain that a little bit, how it counts against your total debt load? And also, what's our max, what's our cap for electoral debt? Is it 15 million? Is it 25?
There is no cap on electoral debt. So with the assent of the voters, it doesn't affect your borrowing base in any fashion. So in terms of non-electoral debt, I think it's either 250 or 350. I forget the stat. It's either 250 or 350 of essentially the borrowing base, and the borrowing base is based on your average annual revenues. So that the borrowing base aspect that percentage does limit your overall borrowing capacity. In terms of the millage rate, though, there is no, so the language in the second-class township code just simply says a millage rate sufficient to pay principal and interest. So it's not capped like on our general purpose tax where it's, 14 mills and that's the maximum. It's the Local Government Unit Debt Act that caps your borrowing capacity, but it's it's either 250 or 350 of your borrowing base.
Okay, so on a $15 million, you're looking at 7.5 mil? No, how many mills would that be? That would be 7.5?
Yeah, so I think in terms of supporting, was it, I'm trying to remember what the figure was. So for each mill, you're generating about $550,000.
Yeah, so this would be about 7 or 8 mills? Oh, am I doing the math wrong?
Per year?
No, not, it wouldn't be that much per year. Because you would spread it out. So, I mean, with land, I mean, you're not talking about, I mean, land has, for all intents and purposes, perpetual value, right? So if you wanted to spread out borrowing over a 25-year period, you could do that, and so it wouldn't be. Jim, do you remember what the figure was in terms of?
Yeah, if you borrow $5 million, and it's a 25-year loan, the average cost to a homeowner would be $27 a year, which obviously we feel is a great bargain. If you borrow the whole $15 million and you use it, the cost would be $81.
Yeah.
Jim, you're going to have to come to the mic. Mr. Bray, if you could come up to the microphone so that people
Yeah,
can
and I'm
hear
sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to call from the audience. Like
Yeah, that's a fine.
This was like phone a friend here or something.
Yeah,
but,
yes. All right. I'm Jim Bray, and I live in Lower Makefield Township. Is that okay, Suzanne?
Jim, you almost made the same
Well,
mistake.
Suzanne's getting even with
Jeannie,
me because she calls me
Jeannie.
Joey now. Okay?
Jeannie.
So, anyway, if we borrow $5 million and we use the $5 million over a 25-year period based upon current analysis, that would cost the average family in Lower Makefield Township $27 a year, which obviously I think is a great bargain. If we borrowed all $15 million and actually used that to purchase property, it would be $81 per family per year.
So that's based on current bond rates, correct?
Yeah, and this is the analysis that I think our finance guy, Barry Luber, came up with. Obviously, that's going to change over the years. Could be lower, could be higher, but that's today's analysis.
Could we by referendum do any of our debt service that way, or has to be specific to land acquisition? Can it be
No,
any
you-
asset acquisition?
I mean, it could be, yeah, I mean, it could be, any borrowing could be electoral borrowing, yes.
I mean, why wouldn't we just set it at $50 million?
Right, and then.
Right?
Yeah, and then use it as worded, not only for acquisition, but for, maintenance and.
For anything, I mean, as long as it's debt service related, and it's a referendum of the voters.
I do think a piece of that conversation, just, to be, as we try to educate and everybody understand that when we purchase land, we take it off the tax rolls. I'm not saying that undeveloped land is incredibly highly taxed for the township, but there is that second piece to it. It's not just that, we now have land that we have to maintain and protect, but to the extent it reduces our tax base at the same time.
I guess what I would also say, though, is the communities that have more open space have much higher property values. A Colorado State's university study indicated that municipalities with more open space had on average 35% higher property values.
Tell that to New York City. It's the highest values in the world.
They also have parks, though.
They do.
Yeah.
But-
So, for us, I think that's an opportunity to help. For many, is their most significant asset is to make sure that this is a place that people want to live. And part of that is having open space, having greenways for animals to move freely so that you don't hit them with your car, having clean air. all of those things are why open space is such an important valued item. And I know, Jim, you had 2 slides that you wanted to share.
Yes, but is this the appropriate time to do that?
Sure.
Okay, all right. So Dave, maybe you could put the number 1 slide up, or Sean, who was ever in the back. That's the number 2 slide. Yep, okay, you're right now. All right, the Lower Makefield Environmental Council has had a long history with the acquisition of open space ever since the council was formed many, many years ago. And the current council feels no
Oh,
differences.
the microphone.
Feels no difference as far as that's concerned. We feel that one of the best gifts that the Board of Supervisors can give the people of Lower Makefield Township is the acquisition of open space. So I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the benefits that we gain by the purchase of open space. Firstly, if you believe, as I do, that in order for all life forms to thrive, a healthy environment is required. And I think we are very, very mindful of that precept in Lower Makefield Township. And I think we have the ordinances and resolutions that we've passed over the years to show that. It's important for the people of Lower Makefield Township to recognize that. Now, as far as environmental benefits are concerned, flood mitigation, for instance. What we're dealing with here is pervious surface. The more open space we have, the more pervious surface we have, the more plants we have growing, the more trees we have growing. A mature tree can actually soak up to 400 gallons of water in a day, which I think is absolutely amazing. And quite frankly, you never see water flowing out of a forest, because no matter how severe the rainfall, the forest will actually absorb it. We have improved water quality because of less runoff. When you have runoff, you have nutrients in the water that ends up in our water supply. Air quality. Trees and plants give off oxygen that we all need to breathe. Wildlife habitat. One of the real amazing things about open space, especially when you can connect corridors, that you actually preserve wildlife habitat. And wildlife habitat is real important. Birds, for instance, if you don't have like a lot of birds and squirrels, you don't have regeneration in a forest. So it's really vitally important. And I think outdoor recreational opportunities, speaks for itself as far as our wonderful park system is concerned. When you look at the financial benefits, you have increased property values for not only nearby homes, but for literally the homes in all of Lower Makefield Township. When we secured the Reagan tract, I guess several years ago, we were walking around there and we talked to some of the neighbors. They were absolutely delighted because it's a beautiful 7-acre space and there's homes all around it. Well, at that time, basically every home near that probably could add another $10,000 to its price tag. Plus, also from a natural or a native plant viewpoint, when we actually took a walk around that property, there's a lot of really beautiful native trees in there. And one of them is an umbrella magnolia, which is not super rare, but it's not very common. And that whole area is filled with them. As we talked about before, if we borrow $5 million, costs $27 a year for a family. And that's only if we use that money. But let's say we borrow the whole $15 million and we purchase properties. So over 10 years, it's going to cost the homeowner $810. I would venture to say that the value of each of the homes during that period would increase $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000. So what I'm thinking here is that this is a significant benefit, financial benefit for all the people who live in Lower Makefield Township. We also have not spent any additional funds in open space till 2016, when we purchased the Guzikowski and the Hildebrandt property. And what we've seen basically is really rapid development of these unprotected open space areas in recent years. And if we can have the second slide, please. All right, what this slide shows, and these are based upon Lower Makefield Township numbers from the master plan in 2003 to the master plan in 2019. And during that 16-year period, we actually lost 736 acres to development. And now we're looking at 2019 to 2024. And that 5-year period, we lost 205 acres to development. And some of those examples are the Torbert Farm, 108 acres, the Wright Farm, 50, and then 3 other properties adding up to about 50 acres. And the total was we lost 205 acres because of development. We want to stop that trend. And the open space bond issue that you have in front of you right now will, for instance, do that. We have classified, or actually given the board, a list of properties that we think are, that we would like to acquire. And we think these are properties that are highly developable, and some of them are actually linked to parks in the township, which make them actually even higher acquisition properties. Now, the great thing I think about open space referendums is the people make the decision. And now it's really a win-win for all. We put a $15 million bond referendum on the ballot. And this is democracy, I think, at its finest. If the people want it, they say yes. If they don't want it, they say no. But historically, we've had 2 or 3 of these over the recent years. Well, I should say 2010 was the last really huge one. And at that time, over 70% of the people said yes to the bond referendum because the people want this. And it doesn't cost the township basically any money. The people pay for it. If they want it, they say yes. If they don't want it, they say no. But I think most people realize what a huge bargain we're looking at right now, because for $81 a year, we can acquire up to $15 million worth of open space. We do have several candidates, and we're also taking a look at the list that was created in the 2010 referendum, where we actually reviewed 283 properties. And we're constantly culling properties out of that list that we feel are appropriate. As in the past, the Lower Makefield Township, EAC, will work with the Board of Supervisors, glove in hand, to acquire some of these properties. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, before I sit down, I'll gladly do my best to answer them.
Thanks, we're good.
All right,
Oh,
thank
go
you very
ahead.
much.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, so I didn't get away that easy, huh?
I don't have any questions for Joey, is that it?
Joe.
But I'm teasing. But if you have questions for him, please.
If you can go back to that second slide, there's a little bit of data there that's kind of not accurate.
Like what?
Well, you're saying that preserving land increases property values. We haven't acquired any land since 2016, yet property values in Lower Makefield Township have skyrocketed since 2016.
Obviously, through inflation, property values increase, okay? But I think when you have a large...
Well, you can't think. You have to look at the data, right? I mean, your opinion or the opinion of people that live in the township that want to preserve open space and have open space to the house that they currently own is one thing. The market dictates valuation, right? So people are coming in droves to Lower Makefield regardless of whether or not we're preserving open space or not. That's kind of telling you whether the value... So I just don't, arbitrarily say values are going to go up 10 or 15 or 30 or $50,000 if we preserve land. You can't accurately dictate that because the data doesn't show that.
Well, that's my opinion. Lower Makefield Township is a very favorable place to live in. Just look at our geographical location, look at our excellent zoning, our ordinances, and also, you know, the physical beauty of the place. People want to live here, okay? And whether you said we have open space or not, I think when we have less open space, okay, what happens is that you have more development, you ease that for a while, but once the open space is gone, the demand is there, and it's going to be there, because again, this is a desirable place to live. My personal feeling is that I think open space, by acquiring it, adds immensely to the value of each house. I can't quantify that exactly, but that's my opinion. But you're right, there's several other factors at work, James.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And increased property values for lowering township taxes and lower school taxes. Again, I'm not quite sure if that's accurate. I don't think that you can lower school taxes by having less development, right?
No, Jim, not to speak for you, but I think how I read that is that it takes those developable parcels out of, potentially being developed, which when those parcels are developed, it puts more stress on township services, meaning we need more police, fire, rescue, more potholes to fix all that type of thing, more kids going to school, therefore we have to pay for them to get there. Is that?
Yeah,
what
that's
you're saying?
exactly.
That's how I.
Right.
I mean, I'm looking at it from a parcel standpoint. If you don't have homes that are a parcel that can't be subdivided, right? So you're having less tax base pay into the school. If we own that parcel and the school increases school taxes, the burden falls on us, right?
Well, it depends if it's on the tax roll. It doesn't help us, is what we're getting at.
Yeah.
But that it could be relatively
Because the
insignificant.
school taxes are never going to be decreased, right? Just like, I can't tell you the last time Pennsbury's decreased their school taxes.
No, the taxes aren't going to decrease. They're not going to increase, okay?
Did we lose?
When you have less, or rather more open space, you need less services. So this is basically you're betting on the come. If all the property is developed, you need more services. When you need more services, the taxes are going to go up. Now, taxes go up anyway, okay, regardless of that, but that's just through inflation and whatever have you. But
Yeah, I mean, considering that 88% of our tax bill goes to the school, or 90%, something like that. And we're looking to own parcels that were within the school district that are now going to go up. I mean, we have to also consider that. You know what I mean? It's not just necessarily, you can't paint it with a broad brush and say, property values are going to go up by 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000. And I appreciate your opinion. I'm assuming you're not an expert in valuation, right?
no, I'm an expert. I'm not an expert on valuation,
Okay.
but I feel strongly that that's the case. And I think, quite frankly, with that Reagan tract, when that was purchased, I guess it was about 10 years ago, my personal opinion is that I would think every house contiguous to that went up appreciably. The exact number, who knows, but
Well,
basically what I'm talking about is logic, not exact numbers, okay?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and again, market is dictated by the sellers, not the buyers, not the sellers, right?
You got it.
So as an owner of a property next to open space, we may think that that brings value, but at the end of the day, it may not.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
And quite frankly, I hope we're going to get a 5-0 vote for this tonight, okay?
Thank you.
I'm hoping we don't vote tonight and continue the conversation and vote when we're closer to the time.
To your point about is Dave gone?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Yes.
lost them for 9:30 as a.
Hard
I think generally speaking, I'm very in favor of the concept of putting it out to referendum to purchase open space as open space is defined. And I think it's important that, I think Suzanne, you made a comment about making sure that our electorate knows what they're voting for. So the concept of a referendum to vote on purchase of open space, I'm moving it to my microphone just in case. I want to make sure that that's what if that's what people think they're voting on, that's how the referendum's actually written. It's clear. And who knows, maybe there could be referendums for other things, like you were speaking about earlier, James. I will say that there are empirical studies that do show that open space does improve property values generally, but it's obviously nuanced, as you were saying. And everything Mr. Bray said about natural resources services being provided by open space is absolutely 100% true. I've done my own research in an academic setting on that for years, and we'll start to hear something pretty soon with our new stormwater rules talking about ecosystem services or green infrastructure or nature-based solutions that try and mimic a lot of the properties of open space in a built environment. It's just because it's a built environment, we can't necessarily do it like nature does, but we try to mimic it because nature does a great job on its own. Now, specific to, that's a soapbox that I'll get off of. Now, specific to the language as written, I do have a few concerns about how it's written relative to keeping it exclusive to open space. I think the inclusion of and I'll read it a little bit just for context, but for the purpose of financing the acquisition of interest in or improvements to real property for open space. I have a concern about including the term or improvements to. I think that can be leveraged by different people in different ways to not necessarily be in the spirit of the open space purchase. And then as we go further on down through this, including but not limited to the preservation of environmentally sensitive areas, open space for agriculture and conservation easements, natural resources, historic land, active and passive recreation and cultural purposes. Using bond funds to purchase land to be inclusive of active recreation can also be a slippery slope when we're talking about open space acquisition per se. Doesn't mean we don't need active recreation, but active recreation has a broad definition. So like, I don't know that if people would be willing to vote for an open space referendum if it includes building large sports complexes or other things that might be active recreation that we might be able to fall under that umbrella. As an open space referendum, I would want to remove the concept of or improvements and the concept of active recreation, using these monies for active recreation as well. At the same time, as we've seen with Patterson Farm, when we purchase open space, sometimes it comes with some liability associated with it. There may be some buildings on it. There may be historic issues, and I don't mean cultural resources issues. I mean some historic issues with the land that it comes with liability that if we are able to address that liability, then it has a much greater value as open space to us for many reasons. So I would, even though I'm saying I would like to remove the concept of improvements or active recreation, I would include some allowance for addressing what I would term, and open the language here, some percentage of the proceeds for remediation of potential liability issues associated with the purchased property, so that we don't run into a Patterson Farm issue where we buy a beautiful piece of land but has a bunch of homes on it that we don't have funding to do anything. We can't, we end up having structures or soils issues or something that we just don't have money to do anything about. We want to allow us some leverage to that end if we can, in my mind, while still acting in the spirit of an open space referendum. So I don't know if folks are up for tweaking language to that end, or if folks want to keep the discussion open for a longer period. Those are my concerns.
If you had a proposed language that would address that concern, I think I wouldn't be opposed to just hashing that out.
I would
Yeah.
move that we table this for tonight. I mean, that would be my goal, and that we have a chance to discuss it, because it didn't make my binder. I had to get it, and I only got it recently. So I have a lot of conversations I'd like to have with people about it, especially as, Maureen says, we have time. So in the perfect world, I'd like to continue this conversation and then hear from anybody who wants to speak tonight, and then talk about it again in July or early August. It's my hopes and dreams.
Are you making a motion to table?
Well, I want everyone to have a chance to speak before I do that, because I don't know if Matt wants to say anything or you want to say anything.
Before you do that, Maureen, I know we talked about 45 days and 3 weeks in a row or something like that. Could you? Are you
September. September is, it would be, in September would be 45 days prior to the date in which it would be on the ballot.
So whatever
it
our
would be-
first September meeting is, we should have those locked down
Yeah,
regardless.
but in order not to cut it that close, I'd prefer, if we could do
Yeah,
it
do
in
it on-
August. Maybe have the conversation in July, maybe continue it into August, but make a decision at that point in time, so we're not running up against the clock.
Oh, Thank you.
Could we possibly have like a public meeting, like a special meeting, where we invite the public out and we can talk about it?
Well, there-
Hash it all out, like maybe in the next few weeks, and then put all those revisions into,
Or we could just use our next public meeting for that, too. I mean, well, I would go back to, is
We only
there,
have one meeting in July, just so
Right,
everyone's
yeah.
aware, right?
but we don't have a formal motion to table. So if that's the desire, there should be a motion and a second.
If the supervisors are done talking, then I would make a motion to table. I don't want to cut
You
anybody
you
off.
can make that at any time.
I know, but
Appreciate that.
I move to table this.
Second.
Do we discuss that? We don't.
You don't have to, you just
discuss
take a vote. No. Huh? You can if you want it.
Dude,
I mean, my preference would be to hash it out. I think we're close, and so, I mean, we have talked about this, but I'll acquiesce to I appreciate Supervisor Blundy's concern about having time to mull it over, so that, I don't have a problem with that. I'm flexible on that. So,
I like
with
the
that,
input. I like the concept of getting input, as much
Yeah.
input as possible.
with that, I'll call a question on moving to table. All those in favor of tabling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, I'm opposed, but that's 4-1, and that's fine. Do we have any other general updates?
Just very briefly stated, general updates. We have, and I think I've reported the last meeting, we're drafting and fine tuning a number of ordinances, including the sign ordinance, the short-term rental ordinance. We will revisit the tree replacement ordinance based on the conversation this evening.
Yeah.
And that's it. Those are the
Okay.
three that are of primary importance.
Well, I know that you're working on the Historical Commission's ask about
Demolition.
demolition.
Correct.
and
I'm sorry, yes.
The commission is very interested in seeing it as soon as you have some revisions so that they can.
It is. We are looking at other
We have a comment?
similar ordinances in various
We do?
locales and are trying to assimilate the information.
Okay.
So that is on my list. I apologize.
Thank you.
Is there a public commenter that we missed? Yes. we should
Oh,
let-
sorry.
I apologize for that. I know the discussion moved forward. Yeah, we're still working on the system. It's better than when I had to ask if there's a caller. It was like a,
Radio show.
okay,
If you're watching at home, please feel free. Yeah.
okay.
There's another public comment
You
period.
can come back.
Yeah,
We
you-
want to hear from you,
Oh, no.
whoever
Yeah,
you
there is
are.
an additional public comment. Yeah, I apologize for the person who's online. I know the conversation got moved and we decided to table, but you are welcome to call and we would appreciate your comment after. So if you're listening, which normally the DJs tell you or the talk radio people say, when you call in, turn off your radio because you don't have that you listen, but you're free to listen or stream and then call us, that's fine. Going back to the other general updates with the solicitor's report, you were speaking in terms of the historic demolition ordinance. The moment we get something, I know there's a member of the Historical Commission here that would definitely want to review it. And I have no problem with making sure we get that, to them before the meeting or what have you, as soon as we get a
That is,
crack.
and that is on my list. I apologize for not
Yep.
mentioning it. It is being worked on.
And interestingly enough, we did have a COA for a sign lighting in their consent agenda, so hopefully
Oh.
that's kind of in line with the new.
Oh, yep. Moving on to agenda item 12, supervisors' reports. I already made mention of the planning commission discussion where we did review some initial dialogue around stormwater management ordinances. Be sure to follow that. That will be coming probably later in the year, and that's all I have. Supervisor Grenier?
Sure, I'll change the name to the Patterson Farm Master Plan Advisory Committee rather than ad hoc at this point, but we met, our most recent meeting, the members of the various subcommittees within the committee gave some great presentations. One of the key items that came out of that is the building subcommittee. They did several building inspections and cataloged several issues. There is an opportunity soon, Mr. Bray's gone, dang it. We think to potentially have volunteers do some limited work at the properties in a safe manner. We're working with township staff to identify exactly what, but there's some that the committee is supporting. Really, if you've driven by, you may have seen like ivy growing up and down in different areas where we may be able to use volunteers to help deal with that issue and really start to get some people involved and see some movement as we look at some of the bigger issues that we're going to spend money on. But really, we're starting to see some good movement and ideas and plans come up.
Well, and related and not related, and maybe that's why you said, too bad that Jim is gone.
Yes.
There's a lot of invasives along that Mirror Lake part. And if we could get that as a project, not really related to the property per se, that would be,
It's a nice one.
Yeah.
Get people out there. So the reason I brought up Mr. Bray is that the thought is that we could potentially leverage the EAC's expertise in developing community events, along with potentially our public works staff to provide some guidance and some other folks that are good at organizing community events.
why do I see you in like a straw hat with a piece of hay whitewashing a fence? I don't know.
Whatever you need, I'll do it.
Not again.
No comment. Otherwise, EMAC and Farmland did not meet. Zoning Hearing Board had several items on the agenda last night, a few continuances because you were not able to attend. Generally speaking, it's the usual suspects in terms of the types of projects, and there were some folks that weren't able to attend and some more that will be continued to future dates that are generally along the same line, stormwater management issues again. They are very interested in the notification ordinance that we're looking at. So they've provided their feedback on that already. And then separate, for anyone that's looking to put in an appeal to the Zoning Hearing Board, they are considering consolidating meetings over the next few months. So just keep an eye out for that and obviously go through our township staff to plan accordingly. That's all I have.
Supervisor Ross?
No report.
Supervisor Blundy?
I can be brief. We won't meet again until the middle of July, and then that weekend, July 19th, will be the celebration of the golf course's 20th anniversary. So please keep our social media feeds on your list, because there's going to be a lot of different activities planned, and hopefully everyone will get a chance to stop by and celebrate our township's public golf.
Supervisor McCartney?
I have nothing to report at this time.
We're on to agenda item 13, other business. Does the supervisor have any other business to bring before the board at this time? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to appointments and reappointments. I don't believe there's anybody for that.
But I do think we have a vacancy, some vacancies, maybe even on Park and Rec, the gentleman who retired. wasn't he on Park and Rec after serving the township for quite a long time? Anyway, if you're interested in different committees, please send your resume.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 15, additional public comment. So and I feel just horrible about the caller who hung up and didn't get a chance to speak before the open space discussion got tabled. And seeing that the light is not on, I'm not seeing any other callers, nor do I see anyone who has visited the podium. So with that, I'll move on to agenda item 16, and we'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Good night.